521 in KPEL. Treasurer John Kennedy is joining us, and as I mentioned to him and to John here in the studio, John Kennedy is one of the people, man, when you tell him to call at 520, at 5:19:59, you know the phone's going to ring. That's amazing. Thank you for joining us.
You bet, Ken. How are you and John?
We're doing
great. Doing well.
Good.
We're doing great. So we got some contracts that are going to be kind of cut back a bit because they're from out-of-state consultants. Is that correct?
Well, we hope so. The governor signed House Bill 30. I think we finally wore him down. He vetoed it last year. It doesn't go as far as we want, but what it does, it directs every Department of State government, when it issues a consulting contract, before it becomes effective, it has to come before the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget to get the Joint Committee's approval. Now, why is that important? The legislature never sees most of these contracts, so now the legislature will have the authority to say no. It will also deter some of the more ridiculous contracts from ever being confected. And by that I mean some of these consultants that have been getting these political contracts for years, they'll never go in front of the public and the press in a public meeting for the Joint Committee and try to get the contract. They know it'll be hopeless, so they'll just give up. Now, how much of that will happen, how much we'll save in that regard, I don't know. But if the Joint Legislative Committee does its job, it'll decline to approve some of these contracts, and the money will be shifted to higher education. I think we can save a lot of money if we do it right. The legislative auditor just did a report. He found that we have 19,000 consulting contracts, and what was particularly surprising, or maybe not, he found that 4,600 of them are off the books. They're not even logged in the Office of Contractual Review.
What?
Yep. He found 4,600 consulting contracts, which are supposed to be approved and listed on the website, were not there.
Now, what is the? Thank you for joining us today, Treasurer Kennedy. What was the nature of the contracts? I mean, are these very, very small ones? Or are they just sort of emergency?
They're small ones. They're very small ones. There were 4,600 of them, John, that were $20,000 or less.
$20,000 or less.
Yeah.
Now you see,
he found that it was right at a quarter of a billion dollars, $250 million.
Yeah, so it all adds up, 20,000 here, 20,000 there. And you know, just as an average middle-class person, I'm thinking $20,000, I could use a couple of those contracts.
Well, of course. And most of these small contracts, I shouldn't say most, many of these small contracts are just political. It's just somebody, hiring somebody that they know. I'm not saying that they all are bad, but I'm guarantee you 10 to 20% of them are bad. Now they'll have to see the light of day, and the sunlight's a pretty good antiseptic.
Let me ask you this, because, I've gone through that list after list after list of these contracts, and the thing that always jumps out at me, I think it's real easy to point out some of the contracts that are just, you look at it and you say, why in the world would we contract $300,000 to promote alligator sales in Europe? I mean, that's the kind of, why would we spend? I saw one today. I was looking over the budget. We'd spent $7,500 for specialty piano tuning. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's certain things that the government shouldn't be in the business of. But how much of this is because we've privatized and now we're outsourcing things that should have, or at least historically, have been taken care of by the state government?
I think there's a lot of that, John. I also think we're spending money on things that we shouldn't be doing anyway, whether they're done by state employees or by consultants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're not prioritizing. I mean, we're just not.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason is there's no coordination. The legislature never gets to review these consulting contracts. If we do it right, House Bill 30 will change that. And so now, at least theoretically, we'll see how it works. Our right hand should be able to see what our left hand is doing. And I think when the public sees some of these proposed contracts and the press sees them, a lot of pressure will be brought to bear to say, why are we doing that? Why don't we take that money and spend it on roads, or spend it on UL, or spend it on coastal restoration, as opposed to just spending it on something that's clearly a lower priority.
Well, Treasurer Kennedy, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and my burning question is, if we make this whole process reviewable by the state legislature, they don't seem to have the time to get the job done they were already doing. If they start reading all these contracts, what are they going to do? Outsource the reading of the contracts so somebody can break it down to talking points for
No,
them?
the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget has a very, very good staff. And I'm not saying they're going to reject half of them. I don't think they will. But if they will reject 10 or 20% of the most wasteful expenditures, we will save a lot of money. And as I told them, I am willing to help them, and I'll make my entire staff available.
I guess one thing, too, it always concerned me is when I go through these contracts and I see so many of them to out-of-state vendors. Yes. And we have companies, either companies or entities in the state that can do that and would benefit instead of farming it out to a group in Texas or Oregon or California.
Many of our universities can do it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, we have contracts with the University of Oregon, Duke, Vanderbilt, University of Georgia, University of Tennessee, Texas A&M, University of Arkansas. Those are great schools. What's wrong with our schools?
Yeah,
they're pretty
exactly.
good, too.
Exactly.
Well, Treasurer Kennedy, we appreciate you
so
being
much.
with us and
Yes,
appreciate your
indeed.
efforts. It's nice to see maybe they're finally starting to pay attention to some of the stuff you've been telling us for years now.
We're making some progress. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate you
Appreciate
being
it.
with us today.
Thank you so much.
Treasurer John Kennedy joining us. Coming up on 529, we have got Todd Starnes coming up, some local news, some traffic, some weather, and then we're going to talk about flags. Yeah, that kind of flag. That's all coming up on KPEL and Go Acadiana.